Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today we're going to be talking about some recent reads. So this is an October wrap up really. I actually read quite a lot of books in October. I was initially going to do like just a recent reads from the past few months, but then I realised I'd read quite a lot in October, so I was just going to do an October wrap up. But as it's the middle of November, I will probably just call this recent reads. So yeah, I read a lot of good books, like really good books in October. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about them all today. So the first one was I listened to it on audiobook, and that was Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. So I don't know why I'd not read this series sooner, because it's been out for ages and it's right up my alley, but I just never got around to it. And this book, I actually know I did try and start it on audio a couple of years ago, but like could never get past the first 10%. But I finally got through it and I loved it. So I gave this one 4.5 stars. The knockoff of the half a star was mainly because I struggled with the beginning a couple of times before I actually managed to read the whole thing. So this book follows Gabriel, who is telling his story to, what's his name? Jean-Francois? Something like that, who is a vampire. And Gabriel is something called a Silver Saint, which is like half vampire, half human. Of how Gabriel came to be the legend that he is. And then we follow him kind of growing up and his kind of journey to become the man, the myth, the legend. And the whole kind of premise of the story is we're finding out how Gabriel destroyed the Holy Grail and defeated the Forever King. So we sort of come across those, we kind of learn what the Holy Grail is and all throughout the tale of the story. But yeah, I love this one. It's a really interesting look into like fanaticism and cults. I also love the setting of the French countryside. It's really great. I really like Gabriel as a character. He's very like your classic fantasy protagonist, like grumpy, a bit sarcastic. But he like loves very deeply, which I really appreciated. I liked the some other characters, so Dior, who I won't say who she is, but she was a great character. I loved her. I like Aaron, the classic, like, similar to Cassius from Red Rising, where they like hate each other at first and then they become best friends. Yeah, they were probably my main two other favourite characters, but they're like just the satisfaction of the villains as well. Like they were so evil, it was so good. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. Okay, so then next I read The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson, and this was also this was a 5-star read for me. This was amazing. This is like the best fantasy book I've read in a long time. I feel like publishing recently has not been publishing the best books, especially like new authors, so it's always kind of risky. But this was like everything I love about classic fantasy, and so well written. And yeah, just a great time. I would highly recommend. So in this book, we're following Nima, who is part of the Raven sort of faction. So the world's split into 8 different factions, all following a different animal. And she is a scholar of the court. I think she's a high scholar. She is the high scholar, yeah. And there's this competition to choose a new king, because in the world, they have a new king every 8 years or so. That might not be the exact timeline. And they have a competition to select the new king. So one of the competitors gets murdered, and then it's up to Nima to solve what's happened. But there's a lot of political intrigue in this book, which was my favourite thing about it. And obviously the mid-mystery elements as well. But the mid-mystery kind of becomes bigger than it initially seems. Lots of conspiracy theories. Nima was such a great main character. She was so sweet and lovable, but also quite sassy, and struggled a lot with like social interaction, which is really great to see in a female main character. She's definitely very autistic coded. As well, she was very flawed, which I really liked. All the characters in this book were quite flawed, and I quite like that, because she makes sort of a big mistake at the beginning of the book and then almost spends the entire book trying to compensate for that and like the internalized guilt, and it is really interesting, and I really like the exploration of that in this story. The other thing I love the magic system with the whole kind of animals as like guardians, and that was really interesting. I loved the whole cast of characters. So obviously I talked about Nima, but there's some other amazing characters. There's a character that's basically Prince Zuko from Avatar. There's the kind of love interest character. Although it's not a huge part of the story, I absolutely loved the romance in this. It was, I love second chance romance, and this was that. And yeah, it was just so good. And Kane, the love interest, he's like this, his guardian is the fox, and he's very like classic fox traits, like mischievous, and he's like the sunshine to Nima's grumpy. It's just a chaotic bisexual icon, basically. So yeah, I loved him. I love Ruko, who's the Zuko character. Like, the author didn't even try and hide that connection. Who else did I like? I really enjoyed one of the characters who's like Nima's kind of rival female character, who definitely falls into the trope of like bitchy female character. I really liked how in the story, even though it starts that way, it sort of becomes more, and like Nima sort of really understands her perspective, even though they seemingly hate each other and were trying to tear each other down. Like, there were layers to it, which I really enjoyed. And then the villains were so good in this. Yeah, it was really good. There were loads of twists you sort of half see coming, but don't quite see the full twist, which I really enjoyed as well. I'm really excited for book 2. So yeah, please read this. If you take one thing away from this video, read The Raven Scholar. Okay. Next was Fury Song, which I also gave 5 stars. This is the final book in the Aurelian Cycle, which is a YA fantasy series. I think honestly this book takes the crown for me for like best politics in a YA fantasy, with maybe the exception of The Hunger Games. But this book, I can't remember what the first one really follows. So the first book's called Flamefall, and we follow Annie and Lee, who are 2 children of this revolution. So the world, it's a world with dragons basically, and the world used to be ruled by kind of nobles who were the only ones allowed to ride dragons, and it was very sort of monarchy vibes, and then they were overthrown before the start of the novel by this kind of revolution. So the novel, we're living in the revolution's time, and we're following Lee, who is actually the son of one of the nobles that got murdered. And then Annie, who is a peasant who's risen through the ranks and is now allowed to ride dragons under the new revolution, because dragon riders are chosen based on merit now. And we sort of follow their journey through the academy. Obviously the series expands, and this one is the final book. And in the second book there's more characters added who are my favourites, called Dello and Griff. They still feature in this one. There's a lot of like heartbreaking things I feel like that happen to the characters. The author's fairly brutal towards them, but they're like, yeah, just the politics is so good. I think the politics in book 2 was my favourite, but I still enjoyed it in this. And sort of it was a good study in like populism and how populations will be manipulated, and sort of almost what they really care about, and how that like it all comes back to food in the end, and how powerful people in charge can manipulate the population through that, which I think is really interesting. I love the 2 sort of pairs, so Lee and Annie, and then Dello and Griff, and yeah, their like journeys are so good. Dello, I think, is one of my favourite characters of all time. I love him. He's just so like, he's very like gentle for a main character in a YA fantasy, and like just wants to read his poetry. There's a quote at the end of this book, I don't know if that's kind of spoilery to read, but yeah, it is kind of spoilery, but if you've read it, I'll tell you a very small fraction of the quote that's non-spoilery, but it's like the let them sing of others bit. That was so good. So anyway, yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I would highly recommend the series. It's a great YA fantasy. So yeah, that's that one. Okay, so then, so then I read The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong, which I gave 3.5 stars to. This was a really cute, cozy fantasy. I think it just didn't wow me. I just sort of listened to the audiobook and was like, oh yeah, that happened. Maybe I'd have enjoyed it slightly more if I physically read it. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Like, I feel like sometimes audiobooks, enhance my enjoyment of a book, but then other times they sort of lessen it. I don't know, maybe I just chose the wrong book to read on audio. But this one we're following, I can't remember the main character's name. Ooh, that's really bad. And she is this teller of small fortunes, so she travels around on her cart and will predict people's kind of small fortunes. So she'll tell them little things, but not big things. And she comes across these two men, and she tells one of the men he'll like be at the fair with his daughter in a week or something. And then he's like really shocked because his daughter's been kidnapped. So then the main character joins forces with these two men to go and try and hunt down this other man's daughter. And they're just travelling through the kingdom. There's this, I think actually maybe it's the baker that's called Kia. They come across this other character who joins their little crew, and then it's just them going around trying to rescue this man's daughter. So yeah, it was a really cute story. And it was a good balance of like cute and cozy, but with some deeper themes of kind of loss and power, like how you handle your power and kind of almost denial of your power out of fear of retribution. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So I would just still recommend it. But yeah, it wasn't my favourite book that I read. I think maybe it was just reading it after The Raven Scholar. I was like, oh, nothing will hit the same, you know. But I would still recommend it. So that's that one. Then I read The Familiar, which I gave 4.25 stars. So this is by Leigh Bardugo. And I don't know why I put off reading this for so long, because I really like Leigh Bardugo as an author, but I feel like I'd heard kind of mixed things, and then I didn't know if it was about vampires or not. I don't know, it just all I never really got around to it, but I finally, well, I'd picked it up in April, but it was like, this is the right time of year to read this. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. So we're following Louisa, who is a maid in Spain in the 1500s. And she also has a talent for like small magics. And her mistress notices this when she like magically restores a loaf of burnt bread. And starts sort of parading her around to perform for the other nobles. Then she gets dragged into a competition for the king, because the king's like trying to choose a magician or like holy figure to win the war against England. So yeah, and in order to do this, she has the mentorship, of this other character, mysterious character called Santagal, who's this familiar, and he's very vampiric. I don't think he actually is a vampire, but he can also do this magic, and he is ancient, and he was my favourite character. I loved him. He had big like Phantom of the Opera vibes, I feel, and he's just very what you want out of like a haunting older mentor character. Yeah, he was so good. He was my favourite, I think, in this book. I really like Louisa. We follow a couple of other women as well. Her employer, I can't remember her name, Valencia maybe. And we sort of see another interesting perspective through her story. And I think this book is a really good look at different ways women kind of survive in a world that's very dominated by men, which I really enjoyed. And we see it from lots of different perspectives. Like Louisa's kind of journey and story is very different from Valencia's. Her like master's not the right word, her mistress. And we also follow a little bit Louisa's aunt, who's like a courtesan. So you kind of see these women like taking the power for themselves, or taking the power back for themselves, and how they navigate that in a historical context. I thought the history in this book was really good as well. So yeah, I would really recommend this. It was great. So yeah, that's that one. Okay, so then I read Automatic Noodle, which is a novella, and this is about some robots who set up their own noodle shop. And yeah, it was really cute and fun. What did I give this? I gave it 4 stars. And I got this because the cover's amazing, first of all, and I wanted something to like fill the Becky Chambers hole in my heart, because she's not released a new book in so long. Every time I go in a bookshop, I always just check, like, just in case I've somehow missed it, which I'm sure I wouldn't, but like, yeah, she never is. I hope she's well wherever she is. But anyway, this one was really cute and a really interesting look at like probably not a possible future, but like a future where sort of AI and the robots are seen as second-class citizens, and so they're not officially really allowed to be like owning or running restaurants, and humans are very prejudiced against them. So yeah, and they're just trying to set up their little restaurant and live their best life. So it's a good balance of like cute and cozy, but also quite interesting and relevant politics, because it very much mirrored the sort of current issues of otherness and being treated poorly because you're not deemed as the same level as someone else through their own prejudices. So yeah, I really enjoyed that and would highly recommend. And the audiobook's like 4 hours. So if you want a quick but poignant read, I'd recommend that. So then I read Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier, which I really enjoyed. I read this, hang on. I thought I read this when I was in court. Maybe I read this in September. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. So this book follows Donna, who is a nobleman's wife living in London, and I can't remember exactly what happens. I think she gets caught pulling some prank. So she runs away to their Cornish country manor. And when she's in Cornwall, she comes across this French pirate who's been like menacing the local lords. And she gets in with the French pirate and starts exploring on his ship, blah, blah, blah. It was kind of a bit reminiscent of The Princess Bride, but Nonna's a bit older. I really enjoyed this one. I really like Daphne du Maurier's writing. I feel like it feels very classic but also very accessible, and very sort of evocative of the Cornish coast, which I really liked. I'm excited to read more of her books because most, if not all, of her books are set in Cornwall. So yeah, I definitely have Rebecca high on my TBR. I really enjoyed this book's exploration of Donna as a character and her sort of taking something she really wanted for herself, but also the conflict with her responsibilities like as a parent, and does she stick to her life as she knows it, or does she run away and follow her heart? So yeah, I really liked that. I also really liked the character of the pirate. He was great. He was just that very like charming and suave, and yeah, I think if I'd read this book when I was like 14, I would have been like in love. So yeah, that was a really good book. I'm glad I read it. And I read The Gentleman and His Bowsmith, which I gave 4 stars to. So this is like a fantasy romance mid-mystery. It's like a locked door mid-mystery, so it all happens in this big house, and then the people start dying. And I can't remember exactly what happens. This was like an easy read audiobook that I listened to just for fun. I remember this is a second chance romance. Again, I love it. And the main characters that we follow, one is the son of the like lord of the manor, and the other one is like a magical accountant basically, who comes to the manor. I think they're trying to arrange a marriage between the son, one of the characters, and some other nobleman's daughter. I also really like their relationship because they were like became such good friends. And then people start dying mysteriously, and there's these clockwork like automatons that start coming out and scaring people, and are they the ones killing people? Like, what's going on? So yeah, and so there's an element of that, but then also this romance as well. So I did enjoy this. As you can tell, I can't remember a lot about it. I think if you like Freya Marks's books, what are they called? A Power Unbound? I think that might be the last one. What's the first one? A Marvelous Light, that's it. Then I think you would really enjoy this. Yeah, it was really good. Okay, then I read Hungerstone, which by Kat Dunn, which I gave 4 stars to. I mostly read this one because it is set in the Peak District, which is very close to where I live. And I didn't realise, but it is actually really set very, very close to where I live. Often books in the Peak District are set in something called the Light Peak, which is like the South Peak. But this was properly set in like the Dark Peak, which is the like proper like moorland, like bleak moors, big craggy rocks. And that's my favourite because that's like 10-minute drive from where I grew up. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time in that region. And it was so cool to see just like these edges, and they would be getting the train into Sheffield, and yeah, it was great. But so this book follows Lenore, who is married to this character called Henry, who is a steel magnate in Sheffield. And he's like new money, and Lenore is like from old money, but she was orphaned when she was young, so she's had to marry in order to advance herself in the world and make sure she's looked after, and kind of all the reasons women used to have to marry. And so they have just moved to this new estate. I think they used to be living in London, and then they've just moved to this new estate in the Peak District, which I don't think is actually a real estate. I think it's a fictional one, but by context I can sort of work out where it is. And they come across this like wrecked carriage one night, and there's this mysterious woman in there called Carmilla, which you probably know the name Carmilla. So this is technically a Carmilla retelling. However, I read Carmilla very recently, and I don't think it was really that much of a retelling. So I did enjoy this book from the perspective of Lenore and her sort of journey of taking agency for herself, and like acknowledging her wants, and like becoming her like inner realized self. But I didn't think the aspects that were meant to be a Carmilla retelling, like, and the character of Carmilla, I really enjoyed, but she wasn't in it that much. She was more used as a metaphor, I think, for Lenore's own wants and almost madness, and like hunger for more, rather than actually being a character herself, although she was, but it was definitely a metaphorical character. So yeah, I think I would have liked more of her in the book, because she was the best character, like by a long way, and maybe a bit more like vampirism. But I think in this book, it was not meant to be a vampire book. It was meant to be a story about hunger and what you're truly hungry for, as a woman, particularly in the like 18th century, whenever it was set. So yeah, I did enjoy it, but I feel like it could have been better. But I love the setting, although I don't know if it would mean quite as much to you if you don't live there. But it's still a really cool and gothic atmospheric setting, and I feel like it's the perfect setting for like a gothic book. Like, more books should honestly be set in the Dark Peaks. I think a lot tend to be set on like the Yorkshire moors, which are very similar, so yeah, but still. Anyway, so then I read The Book That Wouldn't Burn, which I gave 4.5 stars to. I really, really enjoyed this. This is set in this like fictional library, and we're following two characters in the library, in kind of different settings. Like, one character is in this like closed off section, and him and his like four brothers and sisters are there with just these two sort of automatons, and they can't really escape. And then we're following Livera, who is a young girl who gets brought to the city from this like backwater town, as she's been brought up in this thing called the Dust, which is just like desert land. And she comes into the city, and she gets herself into the like education system, and like gets the notice of one of the kind of important scholars in the world, and he sort of takes her under his wing and gets her into these classes and gets her training to be a librarian. So we're following those two PVs and sort of uncovering the mysteries of the library, and there's a lot of mysteries. This book is a little bit sort of, not confusing exactly, but like meandering is what I would say. But it was a really great book to read if you love books. Like, there's so many good, at the beginning of every chapter is like a quote, either from a book or about a book, or a made up quote from the actual this world, a book in this world, but then some of them are from actual books in our world. And I really love the way the story unfolds. So the kind of lasting cycles of violence is a big theme in this book, and sort of who an enemy and what makes an enemy, I think, was a really interesting concept, and sort of preconceived notions of hatred and prejudice, which I think are all very relevant at the moment. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. The only thing that was a bit take or leave for me was the romance. I can see why he chose to make it romantic, but I think it would have still worked had it just been friendship. Yeah, that was the only like thing that could have been better for me, but otherwise really, really liked it. So yeah. Okay, then the last book was slightly disappointing, but will I read the rest of the series? Probably. And that was The Assistant to the Villain, which I gave 2.75 stars. I just feel like this book, so it's like a adult fantasy romance. It was written like a middle grade book, but it was an adult book. And I think middle grade writing can be amazing, but just the sort of tone of the writing style was very much like a middle grade book, which I love middle grade, but it just didn't quite work because it was juxtaposed with the fact it was an adult book. With some like spicy scenes, and that would like give me the ick, because it was like, ooh. I think if this book had been like a properly middle grade book, it would have worked really well, because it kind of had like Once Upon a Time vibes, where there's this character and she gets a job with like the villain, who's this menace to the kingdom, and she becomes his assistant and then is like working with him. And there's the conspiracy, someone's trying to kill him and like work out what's going on. Or actually maybe they're trying to kill her. Or maybe just kill them both. Take the villain down anyway. So it was like fun and easy reading, but like I said, I didn't like the writing style with the story. Like it just didn't quite match up. But I kind of got used to it, so then I got into it a bit more. And I think that's why I want to like carry on with the series. Yeah, this book, I think if it hadn't been a romance, I would have really enjoyed it, I think is the gist of it. But the romance just didn't work for me at all. And I feel like it's quite heavily marketed as a romance. So yeah, it just, I don't know. That was, I think, my main issue with it. I did love both of the characters individually. Like, Evie as a character was great. And I really liked the villain character. He was so funny. And not like, I feel like he was a bit more nuanced than the typical just like broody male love interest character in a fantasy romance. Like he actually had some depth to him, which I appreciated, and he was quite sweet, really. And I liked seeing like more. It was kind of like The Office, but in a fantasy world. And I liked seeing just like the characters' families, and like, because you don't always tend to get that in fantasy. Like, why did the villain have a brother and a sister and a dad? Like, you know, yeah, so I just think that was quite cute. But overall, I don't know if I'd recommend it. I think when I've read the whole series, I will have more clear thoughts on whether I would recommend reading the series as a whole. But yeah, the first book I was like a bit uncertain on for the reasons I just mentioned. So yeah, that's that. So that's all the books I read in October. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. Let me know any books you've read recently. I would love to know, or if you've read any of these and what your thoughts on them were. Yeah, I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you next time.